This is Beyond the Weekend, a podcast of Cornerstone Church, where we dig into the things we didn't have time for on Sunday. Welcome to BTW. Welcome to this week's episode of Beyond the Weekend. I'm Mandy, Fowler, Director of Spiritual Formation, and today my guest is Abby Young, who's our Director of Connections. Welcome, Abby.
Thank you.
We are in our week 3 of Worth the Risk, as we're talking about different aspects of following Jesus and why they are worth maybe being a little uncomfortable or, worth the risk. And this week we were talking about using your gifts and serving. And that's an area that you not only oversee, but also I know are very passionate about. As we think about, so we are one church in 3 locations. We have two smaller locations, then we have 84th Street. That's pretty large. If you're somebody who attends at 84th Street, you might be asking the question, why do you need people serving? I look around and I see no problems. I see no gaps. Everything's happening really smoothly. What would you say to somebody who thinks that?
Yeah, I mean, part of me is really happy that they think that that's what the impression is. And we do have great volunteers, and we do make things run every week, but we definitely always need more volunteers. There's holes in most ministry areas.
Right, yeah.
And we can always form new teams if people are wanting to, get involved and serve.
Right. Yeah. So the message you should be hearing is that we definitely need you.
Yes.
And that most of the things that you see visible on a Sunday or weeknight, wherever you're here, those are actually not typically staff. Like, we have a relatively small staff for our size of church. And we rely heavily on empowering volunteers and getting volunteers to step in and serve. So, so it's definitely something that we can always use.
Yeah.
And so that's why at least once a year, we have a pretty dedicated day for focusing in on serving and giving people some opportunities. If people didn't fill out their form on Sunday, maybe they're still thinking about it.
Yeah.
They can still get that to you, right?
Yeah. So you can always go online. I'm probably going to mess up the URL. So
okay.
I think you can go to cornerstonemi.org/serve, and you can navigate your way into it. The language we use is serve in our church.
Yeah.
But you can fill those out year round.
Right.
And people do.
Yes.
it's not just a one time.
Yeah, this isn't the only opportunity.
Yeah.
We have ongoing needs all the time.
So if your fall looks busy,
yes,
fill one out in January.
Don't feel like you missed your chance for the year.
Exactly.
Yeah. We always have things that we need. That's good to know. So we really highly emphasized gifts in the message yesterday as we talked about the parable Jesus told about the bags of gold that people were, hiding, and comparing that to the gifts that we might have that God gave us that we may not be using. So as we think about that can sometimes be a little bit hard for people. Like, maybe if you think about somebody who's sitting and hearing that and they're like, I don't know what my gift is. What would you say to somebody like that?
Yeah. I think they touched on it a little bit during the message, but the easiest way to find out what your gift is just to start serving.
Yeah.
Sometimes you start serving in an area and it's really clear that maybe that isn't your gift, and then you can try a new area. So, you could be out front, you could be greeting, and you could be chatting, and you're like, gosh, I'm really more of a behind the scenes person. But sometimes you don't know that until you actually just, try doing it.
Right.
So we always like to say, try a spot 6 to 9 months, because we don't want you to do it one time and be like, this isn't for me. I haven't had this, aha moment.
Right.
So definitely try something. And if it's not a good fit, we can, explore different options. But, and sometimes you start doing it and you're like, no, this is my gift. And how can I become more of a leader in this area?
Right.
And so those are always cool conversations to have. And it's neat to see people kind of get the spark in their eyes as they are serving.
Yeah, I think that's great. Well, and there's no one defined way to do this. Like, sometimes we have had people take a spiritual gifts test. I actually don't recommend those as much, just because, just with a personality test or something, they're not always perfect. It can be inconsistent. You could be, I've been mistyped my Enneagram.
Yeah. Right.
So I usually recommend, like, if you truly don't know, if you look at the list of serving opportunities and then you're like, I don't even know where to start. I would recommend just asking, if you've got a small group or you've got a friend or a spouse or someone who knows you well, to just ask them what they think your gifts are, because those people are going to see stuff that you might not know, that you might not have seen. If they're like, oh, you're actually a really good writer, or, like there could be things that you haven't noticed.
Yeah. And I mean, I meet with people a lot who don't know what their gifts are, or they don't really understand what maybe a serving position is. And those are always great conversations, because they, can start to navigate a little bit more about what different positions are.
Yeah.
And usually they come in knowing maybe a thing or two that they might be interested in. Like, they're like, oh, I'm interested between this and that. Can you tell me more about it?
Right.
And hey, I like answers to questions, so I am all about it. I'm like, let me give you as much information as you need.
Yeah, that's great. So make an appointment with Abby. If you're just
for sure.
I need some help navigating this. And I think that is helpful too, because, they saw the form yesterday that has kind of our needs. There are other things too, though. Like, you might just want to find out about all of our different community partners and our different things inside the church, outside the church that we have going. And, we have all different levels too. We have, levels of responsibility, amounts of time. If you're like, I can only do something that's once a month, or I can only do something once a quarter, we actually have things that you can do. You know?
There's jobs that are really flexible.
Yeah.
That you could come in any day during the week, whenever it fits your schedule, and you can help with something.
Yeah.
As long as it gets done in that week.
Right.
So there's definitely flexibility if that's what is needed.
Yeah, that's good. What about, so we also have a lot of needs. So how do we want to describe this? We have things that we need to just make the church function. Mm-hmm. And those aren't necessarily something someone would say, I have a gift in making coffee, or I have a gift in, picking up bulletins that are on the floor after the service is done, or whatever it is. We're supposed to call them programs, not bulletins. It's just old church life. We have things that aren't necessarily, you wouldn't necessarily say like, oh, that's my gift.
Yeah, they're not very flashy.
Right.
It's not something you really are gonna go and tell people about.
Right. And yet there's such high need. Like, if we didn't have people doing them, we wouldn't be able to function on a Sunday morning, or whatever it is. Mm-hmm. So how do we want to talk about that? Like, there are things that the church has need for that aren't necessarily your gift.
Yeah. So I mean, I've heard it being described as like, there's chores of the church that just need to get done. And then there's the other stuff, you know, that's kind of aligns more with like your passion. I don't want to say it's overflow, because you should be serving out of an overflow anyways, but it's something that is, I would say in my experience, it's usually a little bit more fun.
Yeah.
It's like, but that's not for everyone. I mean, some people can be serving in the same role and have a different experience.
Right.
So it's like, for me, being like serving in kids would be just a chore for me.
Right.
But I would be alive if I got to serve coffee.
Yeah.
Right. And so for everyone, it's a little bit different. But it doesn't mean you need to become alive every time you're fulfilling a serving role.
Right.
Which I think we get kind of stuck on.
Right. Well, because we're in America and we have like kind of a high emphasis on finding your passion or your dream or your, and maybe making a name for yourself, or, so we might have this vision of like, I have to wait until I find the perfect thing that lines up with my gifts so I can start a new ministry or whatever it is. And that can happen very much. That's possible. And, if you have something stirring in you, we always would like to have a conversation with you about what that can look like. But I would say don't wait for that.
Yeah, I agree. I think you just have to take that step and just start doing something.
Yeah.
I might be skipping the order of things we're going to talk about, but like I think about someone asked me to join the Family Promise team when I was new to Cornerstone, and I'm like, I don't know anything about this, but I just took a step of faith and I did it, and from that, I do have a passion and purpose. And I would have never thought that that is where it would be. And it's just, I've learned so much through it. And I've definitely, it's just changed my whole life by serving in that ministry. And I would have never thought that it would. So sometimes getting just involved, your purpose is revealed in that time.
That's a great example of that. Well, and thinking too, just about, as we go into, it's more about kind of our posture or like our heart kind of attitude going into it of what we're open. You know, if you go into something, you're like, oh, I'm just doing this because the pastor said I should.
Yeah.
You know, or because that's what Christians should do. And not, you know, God can still use that. God can use anything, as we see over and over again in the Bible. But to go into it with maybe a air of, I don't know what could happen with this, you know?
Yeah, and I think, like, you know, sometimes you can beat yourself up for feeling grumpy about serving, but it's like, let's be realistic that you feel grumpy sometimes about a lot of things.
Yes.
And you still do it, and then you come out like, you're like, oh my gosh, I have plans with my friend tonight. Like, I'm so tired, I don't want to go.
Right.
You know, it's like, it's not just to do with serving.
Right, that's so true.
It's just like you're giving of your time, which is so precious, and sometimes it can feel, you know, not the most exciting to give that up.
Right.
So I think just knowing that just because you have that feeling of like, gosh, I really don't want to be doing this today or tonight. I don't want to wake up early tomorrow and, you know, make coffee. It doesn't mean that there's something wrong and that you shouldn't be doing it. Right. It's just a human.
Yes, this is a human response.
Yeah.
Well, and we find that, you know, I often think too, for things that, if you think about this very open-handedly, you don't know like where God will meet you in an act of service, like who you'll encounter, whose life you'll end up touching. You know, we hear stories all the time of little conversations or like people, you know, people doing family promise and different things that happen along the way of serving. You have absolutely no idea what will happen. And so that's why I think there can be a little chance for some spiritual attack. Because I see that happening with like, I never feel like going to small group. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, and then it's like always good, you know, like that same thing will happen, you know, like you'll have a little bit, because I think that is a place through the act of serving, you know, Jesus lived this out, modeled this for us, that we should be serving. And so I feel like that is a place that God can meet us. That is, can be really, and can be life-changing even. I'm not going to say that can happen every time, but.
Yeah, but I think that if you stick with serving and you find the right place, it is life-changing. Yeah. Especially if your motive is clear. Yeah. You know, if you're serving out of an overflow and you're serving because Jesus modeled it. Yeah. You're serving to show God's love. Right. Like it will be revealed. Right. But if you're serving because you feel pressure from the church or because a form was handed to you when you walked in or because your spouse is telling you need to. Yeah. Those ones are hard to turn around. Right. Yeah, because you're going to be looking for the negative. Yeah. Yeah. Interesting. Well, talk a little bit about... let's go back to Family Promise a little bit and what you've experienced there in bringing your kids and your family into that experience. What has that been like? Yeah, I mean, so we've been serving with Family Promise. I know my boys were in car seats. They're 9 now, so probably 7, 8 years. And that was just because someone invited me to serve in a small role of doing childcare activities. It was just come play with the kids for an hour, then you go home. That's it. Yeah. And so we went and we did it. And then I loved it. Like, it's just a beautiful experience to have your kids with you. So obviously, you know, when my kids were super little, it wasn't as impactful for them. Right. But now it's just what we do 4 times a year. During COVID, my kids were like, we really miss kids at church. And I'm like, gosh, I'm just kind of confused because Corner Kids is open. Right. Like, we're going to church. Like, I'm not sure what you're referring to. And they're like, No, Family Promise kids.
That's cool.
And they love playing with them. They just look forward to it. They want to go back to more nights. And I just encourage people to get their kids involved in some way, because it's just a great experience to expose your kids. And then it's also just like a bonding moment for a family too, like to just do something together.
Yeah.
And to have conversations about it.
Right.
So
That's great. And we have opportunities for people to do that with their families.
Oh yeah. There's different serving opportunities for kids and families. Family Promise is just one, but you could do hand-to-hand packing. You could greet as a family, serve coffee. I know I'm going to miss some, but can you think of any right now off the top of your head?
My mind went completely blank.
Yeah. I know. My daughter does tech for corner kids.
Yeah.
She's done that since she was 10 years old.
That's amazing.
Once you get old enough, I think probably age 12 or 13, you can start serving in corner kids. And so it's just kind of, it's just great to get involved.
Well, and I know I've seen, and even like older kids, I've seen, like one of our service directors, her daughters are involved in the tech, in the tech booth, you see kind of families who've modeled that. As that gets older, you see that bear fruit. They're doing it too.
Well, and I think that it was mentioned yesterday that someone who was in the tech booth actually started there when he was in 6th grade. And I'm going to have to guess I would guess for sure in his 30s. Yeah. So you're like, for 20 years, he's been serving in tech. So, and, sometimes you learn new skills.
Right.
Too. By serving.
Well, and just to be clear, none of these rules, we're not asking anybody to commit to lifetime in the same role.
Thank you. No. That one's pretty incredible.
That guy is just in his sweet spot of, enjoying it and, we don't want anybody to think that that's going to be it for their lifetime. We do encourage you to give it a solid try. Like you said, 6 to 9 months. If something's really not your cup of tea, you can probably bail sooner than that, but
and I think that that's something that sometimes people, they start serving and then they're like, how am I ever going to get out of this? And it's like,
because they're just going to ghost the church, quit the church.
And it's, like I oversee the hospitality department. And so I don't know, probably like 300 to 400 volunteers. And, I just had a couple who was like, we've been graders for 8 years and we just are in a season where we need to focus on our family. And it's like, yes, thank you.
Yes.
Like, please do that. And when you're ready to serve again, or if you have another area you're interested in, just reach out to us and we'll get you plugged back in. But we for sure want people to be serving out of the overflow and not in a spot just to make people happy.
Right. Yes. And sometimes people might feel, like, oh, I can't say no because it's the church or something. We don't want you to feel that way. We don't want you to ever get burnt out or, like we're using up your life force or whatever, you know, we want you, we want it to be life-giving in some way. And it doesn't have to be in some like I said, some positions are more behind the scenes and less known. And we want you to feel, even if they are kind of behind the scenes, we want you to feel that you matter, that what you're doing matters, and we value your time and we value you.
Yeah. I mean, we for sure could not do this without all the volunteers.
Right.
I mean, I've had volunteers that, come in and organize the fridge for me.
Yeah.
And it's like, thank you so much.
Right. Oh, we really need it.
Yeah. And it's behind the scenes. No one really knows that they're doing it.
Yeah.
But it's so helpful to have them do that.
Right. Yeah. I think as we're winding up, let's just think about maybe a barrier. Like, what are some common barriers that people have for why they might think, oh, I can't, I don't think I can do it.
Yeah. I mean, the first one that comes to my mind is always like a commitment, time, giving up of their time. And gosh, I can't be there the third Sunday of every month.
Right.
I get sick,
what if I get asked to do something? Yeah.
And we get that. And there's flexibility within it.
Right.
But I think I think we've already kind of touched on it, like making the commitment to a team. There is value to it.
Yeah.
and people can help with it.
Right.
But time is valuable. I understand that.
Yeah.
And so I think though that by giving that hour or something like that to the church, it is serving God in that role.
Yeah.
And it's really honoring him.
Yeah. Well, we also, we were chatting before, sometimes the fear of the unknown is one of people's biggest barriers of like, oh gosh, I don't know. Yeah. Like what's that going to be like? What if people don't like me? You know, there's all kinds of things that we make up in our heads about what could happen.
Yeah.
How do you encourage people to kind of push past that?
I mean, most things that are new are uncomfortable. I
Right.
can't think of one thing I've done that's new
Right.
that isn't uncomfortable. You know, like even walking into a store that I haven't been into, you're like, oh, I wonder
Right.
what this is going to be like.
Right.
But I still go.
Right.
But so I think like just having that fear, you just have to acknowledge it and move forward. And like, I think most serving positions, you could try it out. Be like, hey, can I shadow someone for the day and just kind of get a good idea of what it's like? Yeah, I think you just got to try it and then kind of see what it's like.
Yeah, that's a good rule of thumb for just everything. Well, and if we take the title of our series to heart, ultimately it is worth, you know, whatever the unknown, you know, whatever you're risking, that might feel really uncomfortable or anxious, anxiety provoking. Ultimately, it's going to be worthwhile to push past that and maybe feel a little uncomfortable for a brief moment. But. Yeah,
and like I have these new greeters, and they're in their 20s, and they're paired up with greeters that I guess are 60s to 70s, and I loved hearing how the 20-year-olds loved forming the relationship.
That's so cool.
With and it's like, you know, like you don't even know what you're gonna get out of it, and that's just a great connection and relationship that they have now because of taking that risk.
That's an awesome way to think about it. And I think like, you know, ultimately, regardless of what it is, how often it is, you know, like whatever you feel like you're gifting may or may not be, if you're giving of your time, God will bless that in some way.
Yeah. In an unexpected way.
Right.
You know, it's usually not what you were expecting to get from it.
Which is kind of the coolest part about being a Christian.
Yeah.
You know, like all of the unexpected things that are better than you could have imagined, different than you could have imagined, not what you would have done if you had been the one in charge, you know? And I think that is like one of the coolest parts about the Christian life.
Yeah. God definitely shows up in unexpected ways.
Yeah.
And then you can go back and you can see how God was at work in it, even when you didn't realize it in the time.
Right. Well, that's a great place to end today. Thank you, Abby, for joining us.
Of
course. Next week we'll be in our final week of Work the Risk, and we're going to be talking about sharing Jesus with other people. So we'll see you next week. Beyond the Weekend is a podcast of Cornerstone Church, a multi-site church in the Grand Rapids, Michigan area. Please follow for more episodes and sermons or find us online at www.cornerstonemi.org. Thanks for listening.